Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Though a bird can't fly, that doesn't mean it never will. By Phalanx. What might have been if Kuina had survived her fall down the dojo stairs? She and Zoro strive to become the greatest swordsman in the world, allegiances and promises notwithstanding. Adios.
It was a bad day to be a pirate. It was unlucky enough that this particular crew had managed to attract the attention of the normally lax Marines. But to make matters worse, two of the squad had turned out to be devil fruit users. Very efficient devil fruit users who didn't seem to be even breaking a sweat in the process of mopping the floor with them. To add insult to injury, they were casually chatting while doing so. It's been a long time, hasn't it? A long time since what? Since we've fought together like this. The first Marine was a burly white-haired man who was utilizing his sea stone-tipped jute with considerable vim. Haven't done it since the academy days. His companion, a tree-like man monster, grunted as he pounded a pirate's head into the ground with one of his appendages. That's because you always run off on your own and hog all the fights, Smoker. Well, who's the one who keeps saying his devil fruit's not suited for fighting? You know bloody well I specialize in espionage, the stick monster retorted. Fat lot of good that does when all you ever do is send me on missions to do reconnaissance and then kick down the front door 5 minutes later. A scream from one of the pirates interrupted the rant. The unfortunate outlaw had been on the receiving end of a blast of the stick monster's burning chemical spray. Why are you being so bloody nostalgic today, anyway? Heard some rumors. Apparently some pirate got Crocodile's open Shichibukai position by capturing Portgas d'Ace. That whitebeard commander with the fire logia whom you ran into at Alabasta. So what about that? I also heard of some talk of them moving you back up to probationary captain. They must be desperate, mused Briggs. Can see why. Marine forces will need bolstering once Whitebeard gets wind of this. Still, captainship'll be a nice change from being your replacement to Shigi. Briggs, you do know you're a piss-poor replacement to Shigi, right? Fa, admitted, you miss her since she went training with T-Bone. Shut up, Barkskin. Briggs scowled at Smoker. Don't call me that. Don't try and play psychoanalyst with me then, Stickbug. How she puts up with you is beyond me. Fa, and now you sound like Hina. As if I wanted to sound like Hina? Briggs' deep baritone voice immediately switched an attempted falsetto. Briggs irritated Smoker. Briggs pity Tashigi and wonder how Tashigi has patience to deal with Smoker. Briggs smash. A pirate found his face accordingly smashed through a smoke logia's body and into a wall. Bastard, you did that on purpose. There was a lull in conversation as Smoker reformed himself. So what are you going to do once they give you a ship? Why the hell do you bother asking that when you know the answer to that one already? Still hasn't changed, eh? Of course not. It's still, track that bastard down and kick his leathery ass all the way across the red line. Briggs punctuated each word with a vehement punch to a pirate. Can't argue with that. Well, if you see him, tell him I said. The pirate captain, who had been trying to escape, was sent flying with a final punch to the face. Hi. The pirate captain's ungraceful trajectory ended when he hit the wall with a painful crunch before crumpling into a heap at the base. Just like that? Just like that. And I've been invited to be part of Princess Vivi's entourage. Again, Smoker was perched on a broken wall, watching as Briggs secured the heap of defeated pirates. The Den Mushi in his hand had its eyes half closed as it continued speaking. Yes, the princess has been quite busy with her diplomatic missions. I barely had any spare time for my combat training with General Chaka. Speaking of which, Kuina, how is the hockey training going? An audible sigh could be heard from the girl on the other end of the line. Progress has been slow. Unfortunately, no one seems to be very familiar with hockey here. I've had no luck finding a trainer, and teaching myself has its limits. We'll just have to see about getting you a proper marine hockey trainer once your assignment is over, which should be soon. So it's been confirmed, sir? Not quite yet, Smoker said, still keeping an eye on Briggs. But soon enough, Kuina, soon. So you'll be leaving soon? Chaka-san, Kuina replaced the receiver of her personal Den Mushi. You startled me. I can never sense you when you sneak up on me in that jackal form of yours." The general laughed. "You'll have to forgive me, Kuina, but that little jump you make never gets old." Kuina pouted. "You're making fun of me. I may be, but I hope this will be adequate as a peace offering." There was a rustle of paper as Chaka passed her a wrapped parcel. Kuina unwrapped the parcel and smiled in gratitude at its contents. The cloying scent of incense was unmistakable. "Then we shall have peace. So tell me about this festival of yours," Chaka said later as they made their way to the royal graveyard. "It's called the Oban Festival. It is tradition back in my homeland to honor the spirits of the departed during this period. Normally, we take this time to visit the resting places of our ancestors, pay our respects, and put the memorial stones in order. Since I couldn't be home this year, I figured." "Of course. Pell." Kuina nodded and placed the lit incense sticks in front of the well-kept gravestone. "Yes," she said softly. The stones were well maintained by the palace custodians, so there was not much for her to do. But somehow being here helped. "Did you come to say goodbye to Pell as well? Your ability to read my mind is quite uncanny, Chaka-san." The jackal's sixth sense does not miss much. "Yes, I shall have to break the news to the princess soon. Captain Smoker expects my assignment to end in the near future and I shall have to leave to resume my marine duties. She will miss you. I will miss you all. You will still be coming with us to Akari Island, of course?" "Of course. I would not desert the princess on her latest diplomatic mission." Chaka gave a cough. "Actually, it's not really a diplomatic mission. Vivi-sama has been working so hard lately. Terracotta thought that it would be a good thing for her to take a little break. And it just so happened that she received an invitation from an old friend, so on our trip to Akari, the place we'll be visiting will be Akari Hot Springs Resort. Welcome, Princess Vivi and party. Uncle Guro, Koza, good job escorting the royal party. Oh, is the lady quite all right?" Crab, Kuina managed to gasp queasily. The shaking and the swaying. "Kuina does not travel well," Vivi explained. It was an understatement. The poor girl looked almost green in the face, even under her layer of makeup. "Such a shame. Well, Lady Kuina, I'm sure you'll feel better once you have some time to settle down in the springs." "Thank you," she replied, but even the old man could tell that her voice was a little strained. He wondered why. His nephew, Koza, found out the reason later. "You're not going to the springs?" he said in astonishment. "It's not a good time for me to go to a hot spring," Kuina explained hastily. "I'll just relax by the viewing terrace. I'll be fine. Go ahead without me." "Is there something wrong? I could tell Uncle Guro to." "Ouch, Vivi, what did you do that for?" Vivi had given Koza a sharp little dig in the ribs with her elbow, much to the young man's confusion. "But Vivi, isn't it a bit strange for her to come all the way here to a hot springs resort and then stay away from the water? Something's not right." "Lady Kuina, are you ill?" Igaram, who had taken notice of this exchange, asked. "Do you need Dr. U to see to you?" I'm fine, Igaram-san," replied the girl, flustered. "There's no need. Don't be shy. If you are unwell you should see a doctor. Your well-being is our concern, we insist." "Oh, do stop needling the poor girl," Terracotta snapped. "And you men, show some discretion, a woman's monthly times as they are." Her loud voice echoed through the resort. Staff and patron alike stopped what they were doing and began to turn their heads towards the source of the noise. Vivi brought the heel of her palm to her forehead in mortified sympathy, while Kuina's face swapped its sickly green hue for a bright red one. After a second or so for Terracotta's words to sink in, Koza and Igaram's faces quickly turned the same color as well. Thank you for your concern, Koza-san, Igaram-san. But I'm going to the terrace now. Enjoy the springs." With this, Kuina turned tail and positively fled from the gathered company. "See? Now you've gone and embarrassed her," scolded Terracotta, blissfully unaware of the irony of her words. It was at this point when the men decided that a tactical retreat into the changing room would be a wise course of action. "You knew," Igaram said accusingly to Chaka later as they settled in the baths. The general had studiously avoided eye contact or any comment during the entirety of the earlier exchange. Chaka simply tapped his nose. "Yes, I did, actually. You could have warned us. Can we stop talking about this topic now?" came an irritated voice from across the baths. They did. Out on the terrace, Kuina was taking in some peace and quiet, sorely needed after the mortifying incident earlier, with a cup of tea. According to most of the people around her, the view was magnificent. She would have to take their word for it, but she did find the ambiance and tranquility of the place soothing, so she enjoyed herself anyway. Cradling her cup, she settled in a thoughtfully provided comfortable chair and began mentally composing a letter to Piers. Dear Piers, it's been a while since our last letter. I hope you are well. How are things in G8? Captain Smoker mentioned you were getting special training of some sort from the base commander himself. I think that's wonderful. I'm still at loose ends finding a trainer for that mantra hockey thing. At the rate things are going, it looks like I'm going to have to wait until I get reassigned before I can progress any further. Sadly, the peace and quiet did not last long and she was interrupted in the middle of her mental composition by a commotion emanating from the front desk. Tell me where he is, a voice, deep, rumbling and absolutely furious, bellowed, or else. This was followed by a crash, and then screams as panicked patrons began running for cover. Sensing that something was amiss, Kuina quickly snatched up her sword and did the opposite. As she drew closer to the site, she began to piece together a mental image of what was going on. The desk clerk of the resort seemed to be facing down the source of the commotion. The troublemaker in question, a heavy-sounding man with a deep voice, was radiating barely controlled killing intent. He had already smashed the front desk into splinters, if the sound was anything to go by, and was menacing the hapless clerk. Stay back! Kuina shouted in warning to the clerk, he's dangerous. Do not come between me and my truth, Blue Sea Dweller. The troublemaker had sensed her approach and for a moment, diverted his attention to her. I have searched long to dispense judgment upon this miserable apostate, and I will not be denied. I don't care a whit about your truth, Kuina responded coolly, but you're threatening innocent people and I cannot have that. Innocent? I am a high priest of Bilka, and the heavens have sent me here. We will have our justice? Kuina had no idea what the so-called high priest was talking about, but she wasn't interested either. Well, high priest, I am Petty Officer Kuina of the World Government Marines and I represent justice here. Leave now, or I will make you. The high priest did not seem to care much for her authority. I warned you, so be it. Her mantra kicked in briefly. Kuina felt the premonition of something large and heavy the newcomer was going to throw at her. Koyajaku flashed from its sheath as she gathered her own killing intent and struck. The projectile, one remaining half of the front desk, was further reduced into quarters which fell harmlessly to either side of her. The momentum of her stroke carried her forward, and she launched herself in a counterattack at the giant. The familiar thrill of battle was intoxicating. Her battle lust, previously quelled in the war for Alabasta and with Pell's death, had reawakened within her once more. How long had it been since she had fought a real opponent? Far too long, that was for certain. This commonplace bandit was going to find out the hard way that he had bitten off more than he could chew. Unaware of how he had just doomed himself, the giant continued to fight. It had to be said, in addition to being strong, he was also surprisingly fast. He met her strike by blocking with a large wooden column that he had wrenched out of the building, and then swung the improvised weapon back at her. Koyajaku's blade protested at the forceful contact as she clove the hard ironwood pillar into two. Her opponent, unfazed by her display of swordsmanship, simply swung what was left of his pillar at her again. A simple thug with no skill, she thought with disgust. As before, Kuina cut the pillar, and prepared to follow up with a slash that would drop her opponent, giant or not, in a single blow. But she never had the chance to, because that was where her fight suddenly went all wrong. Her opponent had anticipated her action, and cunningly chose the moment when her blade was still making its way through the wood to wrench it sideways. Her sword, unable to cut from the flat, was wrenched out of her grip and went flying away, still embedded in what was left of the pillar. She heard it crash into the ground of the terrace some distance away. It was in that moment of shock when Kuina found herself suddenly disarmed and customedly vulnerable. A blue sea dweller who dabbles in mantra. The high priest did not seem to find the fact that he had gained the upper hand over her surprising or gratifying. In fact, he merely sounded irritated and dismissive. Judging from your surprise, it must have been a long time since you fought an opponent who was a match for you. Well, I am that, and far more. Too late, Kuina realized that she had vastly underestimated her opponent. The high priest even knew about mantra, even if he didn't seem to be using it himself. The sudden burst of fear at being made helpless sharpened her senses. Then it all came flooding in, the uncanny whispers of mantra, warning her of where the blows from that other man would fall, where to dodge and jump to avoid them, and where to start edging towards to reclaim her sword. Kuina tried her best to fully tap into her mantra, but the shock of realizing the high priest knew of mantra kept interrupting her focus, and she had a close shave or two where one of the high priest's massive punches nearly snagged her. She gritted her teeth and forced herself to concentrate. How could everything have gone so wrong so quickly? Kuina. It was Chaka. She knew it not only by his voice, but also because of the odd, muddled feel of his presence. He was using that devil fruit ability of his again. Oof. The blow was glancing, but it was enough to send Kuina spinning to the floor, stunned. Distracted. Stupid. 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 She tried her best to roll out of the way, but she knew it was futile. That high priest had incredible reach, and unless her timing was absolutely perfect, there was no way she'd escape him just by doing that. He would be able to smash her with his giant fists before she could even get up. She braced herself for the inevitable crushing blow she wasn't sure she could dodge. But the blow never came, because her attacker was forced to divert his attention to defending himself. A new combatant had joined the fray and had taken that moment to charge right into the thick of things. Despite intercepting the blow meant for him, the high priest was knocked almost halfway across the terrace, and safely away from her. Because Kuina could feel his presence materialize from behind her, he had shifted out of his jackal form. "Kuina, are you all right?" he asked, pulling her to her feet. "I'm fine, Chaka, but I need my sword." "He disarmed you?" Kuina could hear the disbelief in her sparring partner's voice. "I got careless," she admitted, her cheeks burning with shame. It had been too long since she had fought anyone who had been truly intent on killing her, and without realizing it, she'd let herself get complacent. Don't underestimate him. He's powerful, and fast, and smart. Is he after the princess? Ah, of course. Inevitable that Chaka's first concern would be Vivi. He was a true royal guardian after all. I don't think so. He was looking for someone, but he mentioned a he when he threatened the desk clerk. The same desk clerk currently fighting that winged giant? What? Kuina sputtered. The one who had come to her assistance had been the very same desk clerk she had been defending. Yet again, she refocused her disrupted mantra, and sure enough, it was the desk clerk's presence she sensed. He'll get himself killed. Then another thought occurred to her. That high priest has wings? They both have wings, Chaka replied, heaving over a piece of wood with a crash and extracting her sword from it. The desk clerk too. I think they must have some sort of past connection. Kuina? Kuina wasn't listening to the general. She wasn't even reaching out her hand for the sword which Chaka was returning to her. Kuina. Hurry, we must go to his aid. Actually, Chaka-san. She said slowly, barely believing the evidence of her senses. The strange desk clerk was dodging every single one of the giant's attacks, and thanks to some sort of propelling punch attack, was giving as good as he got. The giant didn't seem too bothered by those hits, but at least he was now on the defensive. He seems to be doing fine, Kuina finished weakly. Chaka too, had noticed the clerk's performance. Kuina, that man, his movements. Chaka was her sparring partner, and he knew her fighting style fairly well by this point. Like her on her good days when she was focused, the desk clerk had the ability to predict every single one of his opponent's attacks, but unlike her, he seemed to be doing it a lot more consistently. There was no doubt about it. Yes. That man. He is using mantra. When the alarm had gone out that a fight had broken out somewhere in the resort, the first priority of the royal party was to get Vivi to safety. While Chaka went to investigate, Igaram, assisted by Koza, led the rest of the party to relative safety. I hope Lady Kuina will be all right, Koza asked in concern as they waited in the concealed underground basement. It was also used to store the resort takings. She said she was going to the viewing terraces. I'm sure we have nothing to worry about. Even if she doesn't look it, the girl is a marine officer. She regularly spars against Chaka, Terracotta assured, patting Vivi on the arm as she did so. Vivi nodded, but Koza noticed that she nervously fingered her peacock slashers as she did so. She was worried too. But they've been a while. I'll check it out anyway, Koza said quickly. I know this place better than most of us here. Without waiting for Igaram to respond, he slipped out of the safe room and back to the main complex. In the distance he could hear the sounds of fighting and objects breaking. Great. The repairs were going to be a pain unless Gedatsu-san could get the forest boss back and working for them again. Just as he neared the viewing terrace, the sounds stopped. He quickened his pace and rounded the corner to find that the fight appeared to be over. Whoever had perpetrated it was nowhere in sight. What was in sight was the Lady Kuina. She was kneeling before Gedatsu-san, and speaking very earnestly. Koza couldn't hear what she was saying at first, but as he drew closer he did manage to make out some words. Please, take me as your student. What happened? He asked Chaka in confusion. The one making trouble decided to make a run for it when all three of us combined our onslaught. We decided not to pursue as it might be an ambush. Okay, he said slowly. But why is Lady Kuina kneeling before Gedatsu-san? It seems that she wants him to become her teacher. He does not seem to be keen on taking her on, however. He has been just standing there ignoring her all this while. Chaka sounded rather doubtful about the whole affair. But then again, Chaka didn't know what Gedatsu-san was like. Koza sighed. Gedatsu-san. Koza raised his voice at the resort co-founder. You forgot again. You can't give her an answer unless you open your mouth and say something. Chaka gave him a look of ludicrous disbelief at this. Gedatsu-san, however, reacted by jumping up with a start. I forgot to tell her I will take her as my student. How careless. So you're saying this Gedatsu person is some sort of former priest who just happens to be a master of your type of hockey? Smoker had been surprised to receive an early report from Kuina. He figured that it had to be something special for her to go out of her way, and sure enough, it was. Yes, Smoker-san. I'm not sure of his level of mastery in comparison to marine standards, but he certainly is far more skilled than I am. Then I think you did the right thing. Every little bit helps, and even few weeks of light training under someone who knows what he's doing will make a difference. Actually, it will be intense training. Princess Vivi has suggested that I end my liaison duties early and stay at Akari. I see. I'll make the changes to our arrangements then. Make sure you make the most of the opportunity. Yes, sir. Oh, by the way, about the man who attacked the resort. Briggs managed to dig up some information on him. Akari was not his first time. He's known as the Mad Monk, your rogue. He and his pirate crew started raising a lot of hell earlier this year. HQ put a bounty of 55 million on him. That's almost as much as Zoro's. Kuina sounded shocked. Yes, and it'll probably go up after the news gets out that he was involved in an attack on Alabastan royalty. It's no wonder he gave all of you some trouble. Something bothering you? I'm fine, sir. But, Smoker could hear the hesitation in her voice. I do want to ask, do the Marines have swordsmiths of their own? Something happened to your sword? It's nothing serious, just a notch. I only discovered the damage after the fight, but I would really like to get it repaired. The tone of her voice left Smoker no doubt that to Kuina, any damage to her sword could never be just a notch. He shook his head. That girl and Toshigi were like two peas in a pod. I'd talk with Toshigi about getting it repaired when she gets back from her training. She's the sword nut around here and would know the proper channels. Good idea, sir. I will do so. Smoker sat back thoughtfully after he had finished the call. Briggs had previously briefed him on his assessment of Kuina. And as he had noted, the girl and Rorinoa still did have some sort of rivalry going on. She wasn't going to be pleased at her inability to defeat someone with a bounty near his range. It was a shame she hadn't been able to get that Mad Monk pirate, but on the upside, that meant that once he got her back with the crew again, she was going to be pushing herself harder to get stronger. He approved. With the inevitable war looming, they were all going to need it. So I guess this is goodbye, Vivi said as the royal party prepared to leave for Alubarna. Kuina would not be returning with them. Terracotta had made arrangements for her belongings to be sent over to Akari. Kuina nodded, still trying to come to terms with the fact that she would most likely never see Alabasta, the place that had come to feel so much like her second home, again. Even worse was the idea of saying farewell to the people who had been so much a part of her life in the past few months. Captain Smoker had Sepper into the Grand Line after this, and from what she could tell, it was not likely they would come back to this part of the Grand Line for a very very long time. She would have to make sure that she kept herself busy training with Gedatsu-sensei, because the loneliness and homesickness would probably be too depressing otherwise. Kuina, I know you're going out after the others soon once you rejoin your crew. I have a favor to ask. If you meet with Luffy and the others again, could you deliver this letter for me? The princess slipped her a sealed envelope. Of course I will. Kuina briefly wondered if Luffy could even read the thing, but she supposed the rest of the crew or even Nico Robin, presuming she was still with Luffy, would be capable of reading the letter out to him at the very least. She hoped the woman wasn't making trouble for the crew. When she confided to Vivi about what had happened, the princess had been a little upset, but had also understood the reasoning behind her decision to let Nico Robin go. It was strange, really. She and Vivi, they had both been offered places on Luffy's crew, and even if they had refused, they still trusted Luffy and his uncanny judgment. Damn it, she thought as she hugged Vivi. She was going to miss her friends in Alabasta. I'll miss our sparring matches, Chaka said, when his turn to say goodbye came around. So will I, Chaka-san. And she meant it. Even if they hadn't started out that way, she now considered him the closest friend she had in the whole palace. After Vivi, of course. I'm sorry to hear about that sword of yours. The royal bladesmith back at the palace would jump at the chance to repair it, but the style is so different from ours he fears he would not do a good job. It's all right, Kuina replied unenthusiastically. The topic of Ichi-san's damaged heirloom sword with that notch in the blade was something of a sore point. She already knew the complications. A weakness in the blade meant further usage of the compromised weapon meant it would eventually break under the stress. Knowing her luck and how much fate hated her, it would probably happen at the worst possible moment, just as she was fighting a famous pirate with 100 million bounty or something like that. Kuina could already imagine just how it would happen. It would be a hard fight, a life or death battle with hundreds of lives on the line. And at the end, even with a broken sword and no hope of winning, she, Kuina, would keep fighting and take down the pirate captain before getting overpowered. The outnumbered marine forces would then be finally subdued and the crew taken prisoner. The officers would be lashed to the mast and forced to watch as the rest of the crew walked the plank at gunpoint. All because she had been careless and damaged her sword. Of course, Commodore Smoker, who would have happened to be away at that time, would immediately mount a rescue operation and come after them. He'd then descend on the pirate ship in a rage, surrounded by a cloud of smoke, and teach those pirates a lesson or two about how no one harmed his subordinates and got away with it. Then he'd free the crew and they'd all join in on the fight, and finally defeat the pirates once and for all. But even if the rescue was successful and everyone was safe, Koyajaku would still be ruined beyond repair. She would probably never be able to find a swordsmith capable of reforging it and have to settle for some other commonplace katana. Maybe she'd get over the experience and be even more fired up to go after Zoro to get her Wado back. But then, the worst would happen. Ichi-san would show up, somehow having heard of how Kuina's carelessness had resulted in the destruction of the precious heirloom sword. Which also meant all Commodore Smoker's hard work coming to the rescue would have gone to waste, as Kuina's impending demise from the hands of her former master would be all but guaranteed in that situation. Kuina shuddered. This was something she really didn't want to think or talk about at the moment. But Chaka apparently did. She wondered why. In fact, he seemed to have something on his mind, and was currently struggling for the right words to express it. Kuina, there's something I've been considering talking to you about for a while now, but the events of today have convinced me that I should withhold it no longer. Withhold what, Chaka-san? You're a fine swordswoman, Lady Kuina, but without your sword, or without it in the best of condition, you would not fare well in another fight. Kuina tensed a little. The memory of her inglorious encounter with the mad monk, Yoroge, flashed in her head. She knew Chaka had her well-being in mind, but still it stung that he was taking her lapse in dependability so seriously. It would be best if you considered carrying another weapon until the blade is repaired. I thank you for your advice, Chaka. I will requisition a spare sword the first opportunity I have. Kuina kept her voice controlled and cordial, as much as she disliked being told something she already knew. No, I have a better idea, and a better sword I think you would rather have. Saying this, Chaka placed the hilt of a sword into her hand. The feel of the pommel, the crossguard, the weight. It was all hauntingly, achingly, familiar. That's Pel's sword. You brought it here with you? I'd already meant to pass it back to you earlier, but I wavered. I just couldn't bear to part with it. Chaka said, his voice far away, and a little sad. That sword has much sentimental value to those of us who were his close friends. But he left it to you at the very end. It didn't feel right for me to be holding on to it any longer. And it is a fine sword. One meant to be wielded by worthy hands. Chaka. Kuina was touched, and a little ashamed at herself for assuming the worst of her friend. What was wrong with her recently? She seemed to be going around with a permanent chip on her shoulder and she had no idea why. Pel would have been happy, I think, to know that his sword is in good hands. Perhaps that was what he had intended when he left it with you. They had a touching farewell, and much too soon, it was time for the royal party to go. Once again, Kuina found herself alone in a strange land, the keeper of an orphaned sword and the bittersweet memories of the one who had wielded it. Take care, Kuina, and may the spirit of the guardian falcon watch over you always. Briggs scowled as he worked his way through the stack of reports in Smoker's much-neglected office. Commodore Smoker really needed to appreciate his intelligence resources more. But since Smoker wasn't about to do it, as his XO, it had fallen to the warrant officer to pick up the slack. The thing was, Briggs knew that the Smoker was sharp, but only in a streetwise, intuitive but uncannily accurate way of his own. Personally, it drove Briggs up the wall. Being right didn't matter when you couldn't explain to higher-ups how you were right, but Smoker just never seemed to grasp that. The Den Mushi rang. Briggs raised a prominent brow. A communication or report to Smoker at this time was unusual. He picked it up dutifully, regardless. Briggs here. Commodore Smoker is unavailable at the moment. I'm afraid. Briggs sputtered in surprise at the voice on the line and the words it spoke. Me? Yes, sir. Of course. Right away. I'll be right over. He stared at the Den Mushi for a long moment after the communication had ended. Then he heaved a deep breath, composed himself, and walked briskly out of the office. The passageways of G1 were filled with busy Marines going about his business. Thanks to his long stride, he outpaced most of those heading in the same direction to reach his destination in record time. A polite knock elicited a "Come in" from the occupant of the room. Briggs did as he was told. Warrant Officer, Barkskin Briggs. Take a seat. Thank you for coming so quickly. Thank you, sir, and I don't go by that name anymore. It's just Briggs, now. He took a Icer's curiosity was eating away at his courtesy. But his manners won out in the end and so he waited for his commanding officer to say his piece. Of course, there had to be some other purpose to the meeting. A Marine admiral with many claims on his time wouldn't just summon an inferior subordinate to his office just for a simple, "How are you?" message. "How's the arm?" the admiral asked by the way of breaking the ice. "Fully regenerated. I should have full motor control once I finish therapy." That devil fruit of yours is very handy. Good to hear you have your arm back." The admiral slid a wanted poster across his desk at Briggs. "I heard that you lost it to Nico Robin." Despite himself, Briggs stiffened at the sight of the hated woman's face staring back at him from the poster. Not quite accurate. She simply broke and dislocated it. Crocodile was the one who finished the job. "Still, you fought her. What were your observations?" "Bitter. Cruel." The woman's past victim involuntarily clutched the shoulder of his newly regenerated arm as a throbbing pain suddenly shot through it. "No, it's fine, sir. Therapist says it's only psychosomatic." As I was saying. Nico Robin appears cool and tactical, but is actually angry, scared of the world, and desperate not to show it. And you consider her a threat that shouldn't be allowed to remain free? I don't follow, sir. I'll get to the point, Briggs. My sources tell me that since Alabasta, you've been digging up any information you had clearance for on Nico Robin and the O'Hara incident 20 years ago. You've even been using Commodore Smoker's clearance for some inquiries. I assume you had his permission for that. Yes, I do, sir. Intelligence is my specialty. I like to keep myself, and my unit, well informed. And you felt you were imperfectly informed about O'Hara? Briggs stayed silent at this. The admiral nodded in response. Given your previous court-martial, your caution is quite understandable. But I think I already know your answer, and why. He leaned forward and read aloud the words emblazoned on Briggs' coat. Factual justice. Being in the right is not enough. For you, knowing exactly why you are in the right is just as important. You are correct, sir. Which part of the official story did you think was a cover-up? The surprise on Briggs' face must have been obvious, because the Admiral chuckled. I'm not one of Akainu's camp, Barkskin. And unlike some others here at HQ, I have no vendetta against you. Be frank with me. That's an order. Yes, sir. Well, as you know, I fought Nico Robin in Alabasta. The nature of her devil fruit powers and her tactical knowledge in using them make her a dangerous foe in a ground battle. But something does not add up. The reports clearly show that those evacuation ships were sunk by cannon fire. Now that I have first-hand experience of how her powers work, and now that I think about it, there is no way I can see how she could have sunk 6 ships unaided. Not as an adult, much less as a child. Very astute of you. She also displayed much emotional outrage when the subject of former Vice Admiral Saul came up. It was not the behavior I expected of her. Well, considering what she was said to be like. A flicker of emotion crossed the Admiral's face. Add in the fact that one of the persons involved in Ohara was Sakazuki. Well, I know how he works. It was clear something had been covered up. Why do you care so much about an incident you weren't directly involved in? I was under the impression the only issue you were interested in these days involved the whereabouts of your former protégé. Briggs made a face of disgust and anger. False information was being archived in the Marine database and passed off as fact. And I swallowed it all wholesale without verifying its veracity, as in, I was operating on bad, doctored information and I had no idea. An unforgivable lapse in my own standards. It could have gotten myself and my unit killed. I just couldn't let it go. It went against your factual justice, I see. Well, by your research you would have already known that I was there in Ohara when it all happened. Here's your chance to get your information straight from the horse's mouth. And what price do I pay for this information, Admiral Kuzan, sir? Briggs asked as he regarded the Admiral cautiously. Admiral Kuzan, better known by his nickname Aokiji, looked pleased at their easy understanding of each other. As you said, Barkskin, Briggs. Gathering information is your specialty. I have a discreet matter that needs taking care of which will require finesse in exactly just that. I see. Briggs considered the situation. Admiral Aokiji was known best for being a laid-back sort of commander. Privately Briggs thought of him as a lazy but cooler-headed version of Smoker, but he preferred Aokiji out of all the admirals. At least Kuzan hadn't been part of the lynch mob like that damn red dog Sakazuki had been. If you choose to take it on, I will assign you the temporary role of Special Investigator, which for the purposes of this mission, carries the equivalent rank of Commander. If you are successful, your captainship will be reinstated fully, and should you desire it, you will be placed in command of a ship. So that was where the rumors had come from. The assignment details, sir? Briggs asked. I want you to locate Nico Robin, shadow her movements, and report them to me. It's pretty much what you've already been doing. Just taken up a notch. Briggs didn't need much time to think it over. The choice was so obviously advantageous. I accept the assignment. But I must say, you seem to have a pretty good information network already, sir. Not good enough. I still don't know where Nico Robin is, you do. Briggs looked a little smug at this. Yes, I do. She was last spotted in Jaya a few days ago, in the company of the Straw Hat Pirates. Then you'd better get moving to pick up her trail. I'll make the necessary arrangements with Smoker, and for your transport too. Good luck, Commander. Briggs was hurriedly gathering his things in Smoker's office when the damn Den Den Mushi rang again. Briggs here. Commodore Smoker is unavailable, I'm afraid. Inwardly he hoped it wasn't another call from yet another admiral. Of the other two, he disliked one and utterly loathed the other, and he really didn't have time to waste right now. Warrant Officer Briggs, sir. The voice of the backwater fisherman carried through the receiver, and the Den Den Mushi appeared to have adopted a distinctly puppy dog-like expression. Briggs resisted the urge to correct the rank he had been addressed with. No, it wasn't important yet. Chief Petty Officer Piers, do you have a good reason to be calling? You're not due for your weekly report for another 3 days. Wait, what was that? Then he shut up and listened intently to what the backwater fisherman had to say. They're in G8? Briggs repeated slowly, in surprise. Vice Admiral Jonathan know? Piers replied in the affirmative. Good job reporting this, Piers. I'll inform Smoker. After the call had ended, he fingered the pommel of his sword, then made a note to change his course from Jaya to G8. It was your misfortune to have run into me, devil child, he said aloud, and smiled grimly. Once I'm on your trail, I'll never stop. And now that I have an admiral backing me, it's a truly bad time for you to decide to be a pirate. The fishing float bobbed on the surface of the water. Two pairs of eyes watched it in total silence, with the calm patience possessed only by those who belonged to the same sacred brotherhood. Then the float jerked, dipped below the water's surface, and popped back up. The two figures, who had previously been so still that they could almost pass for statues, immediately sprang into action. He's taken the bait, sir, it's a big one, he's fighting hard. Steady now, sir. Remember. I know. I haven't been practicing all this time for nothing. There was a prolonged period of tense silence, as the struggle between fish and man played out. Finally, a cry of triumph rang out as the battle came to an end. He's tired out. There you are, you monster, you're mine. You've got him, sir, I'll get the net. The tired fish was duly netted and admired by its two vanquishers. A 5-footer, said the young marine holding the net, flashing his superior a thumbs-up sign. Wait till Jessica sees this, Vice Admiral Jonathan reveled in his successful catch. Good job, Piers. Those tips of yours really helped. Well, I was a fisherman before first was a marine, Chief Petty Officer Piers replied, grinning modestly. Runs in the family. My Gramps was one, and so was Pops, and my Uncle Sappy on my mum's side too. My Pops used to say, when you do something for a living, you can't help but get good at it. It was at that moment when something extraordinarily surreal happened. Sir, Piers said slowly, pinching himself. I've been off my meds for a week now, and maybe I'm getting withdrawal symptoms and seeing things, but did you see that too? Vice Admiral Jonathan's response was matter of fact. Why yes, Piers. I did just see a pirate ship fall out of the sky and into our base. The Stan Malay was an archipelago-class marine warship hybrid. These were currently considered to be something of an outdated model among the Marines, but due to their durability and ease of maintenance, a fair number of them were still found in active service almost 2 decades past the time they had been considered modern. Marine High Command could be incredibly cheapskate sometimes. In Briggs' private opinion, archipelagos were good in a straight fight, but otherwise very unwieldy and difficult to maneuver, which was why they were usually flanked by smaller, faster support ships for support. In this case, they had the Pine Peak and the Hawthorne Hill, 2 Arboreal-class Harrier ships. But a fleet of ships only moves as fast as the slowest ship of all of them, and archipelagos were very slow. Not being a very patient sort of person, Briggs was fuming at the amount of time it was taking them to get to Navarone. It didn't help that the navigator was as green as they came. From what he had heard, their regular navigator was down with the measles and had been replaced at the last minute. The veteran officer snorted. What self-respecting Marine let themselves join the Navy without having the decency to at least get the measles beforehand? He hoped this replacement navigator was up to scratch. From the look of the weather, there were going to be some rough seas ahead. Maybe he should have warned the greenhorn about it. Nah. That would be meddling. He knew more anyone how some people resented being told how to do their job. It was none of his business anyway. He was just a passenger on this trip, not the captain of the Stan Malay. The man who held that post was a certain Captain Tenzo, young, newly promoted, quiet, good planner. Knew the value of information. Still inexperienced, and in his opinion, excessively polite. But Briggs supposed that a few more years in service under the imbeciles who ran high command would change that. Of course, while he secretly thought all these things, nothing would ever induce him to repeat this to his fellow VIP passenger on board. Briggs knew Special Inspector Commander Shepard well enough to hold the man in contempt. Sad excuse of a Marine officer. Never served on the front lines but graduated straight to officership thanks to connections. He was incompetent at his job, so he compensated by being a loud bully to anyone of lower rank, and brown-nosing anyone of higher rank. The man also had no sense of scale, organization, or complexity, and any subordinates he had suffered as a result. Unfortunately, this also included the crew of the Stan Malay. The charmless company on board didn't make things any more tolerable. Thankfully, Briggs himself was not under the imbecile's command, so he was free to keep a low profile, stay out of the way in his cabin and hope that the Stan Malay would just bloody get to Navarone already. He busied himself by prepping his equipment. He brought his rifle and saber, but he'd have to leave them behind on this recon mission. He also had a couple of dossiers to look through, plus the special handwritten packet Aokiji had entrusted him with as a goodwill gift. On top was scrawled the terse message, "Ohara. Destroy when done." When Briggs was satisfied that he was fully prepared for his mission, he finally allowed himself the luxury of indulging his curiosity. Aokiji's dispatch consisted of a sheaf of handwritten notes. It was the Admiral's personal account of Ohara, when he had been a vice admiral known as Kuzan 20 years ago. Briggs scowled. The lazy admiral's handwriting was atrocious. There were parts where each word was barely more than a squiggly line and Briggs had to guess what it was supposed to spell out. Well, at least the slowness of the Stan Malay wasn't going to be as annoying now. He would need a lot more time than he originally thought to get through Aokiji's account properly. That was what he had thought, until the storm hit. Piers examined the porcelain cup that Lieutenant Drake had hurriedly handed to him with considerable unease. It was still filled with warm coffee. Everything on the Straw Hats pirate's ship seemed perfectly normal, except that the crew seemed to have disappeared without a trace, just like they did in the ghost ship stories his pops used to tell him. He frowned. Normally the fate of a bunch of pirates wouldn't bother him so much, but this was not just any pirate crew. This was the ship with Roronoa Zoro and Straw Hat Luffy on board. Not only was Miss Kuina going to be upset once she heard, but Piers himself couldn't help but feel unsettled by what might have happened to the two pirates who had saved Shelltown from Captain Morgan. The loyal marine in Piers was torn. On one hand, pirates were pirates. On the other, he knew the Straw Hats were different, and based on his last two experiences with that particular crew, they seemed to be more on the side of justice than the Marines sometimes. The feeling of conflicted loyalty persisted even after his squad finished with their examination of the pirate ship. Tangling with the Straw Hats was not something he wanted to be involved with. He hoped that if the Straw Hats were alive and hiding in the base somewhere, they would have the sense to keep a low profile, and sneak off with their ship when the moment was right. Piers had always been hopelessly optimistic. Of course it didn't happen that way. Zoro was annoyed as he wandered through the winding corridors. Everything had just gone from bad to worse since they had left Skypia. Just their luck that they'd happened to land in a marine base, of all places. Then the crew had been forced to abandon ship and were now separated and scattered all over. And to top it all off, he'd somehow ended up in a crazy marine base that was built in a way that made no sense at all. Zoro. It was Nami, dressed up in a marine custodian's uniform and frantically gesturing at him. He wondered what Nami was so upset about. Why she was moping the floor of a marine base. Anyway, didn't she know that the Marines took great offense to pirates doing that? He had distinct memories of being called a fiend when he had done the same back in the marine base in Logatown. Ah well, at least the Sea Witch would know the way out of this place. Something about being seen walking around openly with 3 swords. Damn bossy witch was mad at him for that now. He was almost relieved when a Marine showed up, spotted him, and froze. Zoro drew his blade almost gleefully. At last, some action. Instead of running at raising the alarm to the rest of the base however, the Marine started acting very oddly. 1. He yelled for Nami to get away, grabbed her, and shoved her into the nearest wall closet. Her bewildered face was hilarious to see. Secondly, after Nami was out of the way, he raised his hands in surrender, and said something that immediately had Zoro aborting his attack. What did you say? The swordsman couldn't believe his ears. I said, what are you doing walking about in the open like this? You'll be spotted and get captured and Miss Kuina is going to be upset that you got her sword confiscated. You know Kuina? Miss Kuina is. What Miss Kuina was never came to light, however, as a clatter of footsteps announced the approach of more people. The Marine swore, grabbed him by the back of the collar, and before Zoro knew what was happening, he found himself outside and alone in a balcony with the strange Marine. That was the second company changing shifts, the strange Marine said, heaving a sigh of relief. Too close. Why are you Straw Hats here in G8? Why did your ship drop from the sky? Now that he had more time, Zoro took a careful look at the strange Marine. He was pretty unremarkable, tanned skin, untidy dark hair with regulation sideburns, but pulled into a distinctly non-regulation knotted ponytail that stuck out from the back of his cap. Navy blue vest over standard uniform. The only visible weapons he wore were a pair of knuckle duster gloves. He was no one Zoro recognized or remembered. "Who are you again?" The Marine's ears turned red. "Oh yeah. I should have realized you wouldn't remember. Yeah. Introductions. I'm Piers. I'm a friend of Kuina, your sort of sister. You know, wears kimonos, super cool face scar, blind swordswoman?" Zoro squinted at the Marine. "Okay, so why are you helping me?" "Miss Kuina's my friend," Piers explained again. "I helped her follow you from Shelltown to Alabasta. She wouldn't be happy if anything happened to you or her heirloom sword." This sounded rather genuine. Also, something about this Marine was niggling at him now. Then he remembered. "Were you the Marine who was with her in Logatown?" The Marine looked relieved. "That's me." Awkward silence. "Okay. So what happens now? Where are your crew? We need to round them up and get them out of G8 as soon as possible. It's a good thing I know the base pretty well. You'd better let me lead or you'll get lost. This place is pretty confusing." Zoro heartily agreed. Then a thought occurred to him. "Oi, won't you get in trouble for helping a pirate?" Piers looked apprehensive. "Yeah, well, don't worry about it. Let's just focus on getting you Straw Hats out of G8 as soon as possible and we'll call it even, I guess. The longer you guys stay the harder it'll be to leave. Where did your friends go?" The balcony door suddenly swung open and Nami reappeared. Judging from her face, she had heard the last line and had severely misunderstood the situation. "Ah, miss, you shouldn't be here. It's not safe," Piers began speaking quickly. Nami ignored the Marine. "Zoro, what are you doing? Don't tell him anything. Are you stupid or something? Wait. Don't answer that. Just get rid of him. Let's get out of here, or I'll triple your debt." "Nami, wait. This guy is actually helping us. He's there," yelled a voice from a distance away. Zoro turned to see several small boats in the waters below, all filled with Marines. To a man, they were all looking up at him. "He's got 3 swords. It's Roronoa Zoro." Nami smacked the heel of her palm to her face and grumbled something that sounded a lot like, "I knew this would happen." "Oh no, it's Lieutenant Drake." Piers' face had paled. The large burly Marine officer leading the Marine patrol was shouting orders in their direction. "Hey, you two, fall back. You can't take him alone. That's Roronoa Zoro, it's too dangerous." Nami, realizing her disguise had saved her, began acting like a terrified Marine custodian. Piers, on the other hand, had frozen to the spot, unsure of what to do. It was then when Zoro made a decision. "Sorry, Kuina." Wado flashed out of its sheath as Zoro carefully calculated the amount of force needed. The blade struck home with a very painful-sounding smack. To Piers' credit, he took the hit like a man, but he still crumpled unconscious to the ground afterwards. "He's kidnapped one of our men." "What?" Vice Admiral Jonathan stared at the Den Mushi, wondering if he'd heard wrong. "That fiend pirate hunter Zoro kidnapped one of our men," Lieutenant Drake repeated. He was seething with so much rage that it carried through the expressions of the little snail. "Do we know who it is? Is he planning to use our man as a hostage?" "Not sure, but we've identified the captive. It's Chief Petty Officer Piers." A moment of dumbfounded silence, and then, "Piers, but how?" "We think he was trying to stall Roronoa to let one of the custodians get away safely. She managed to escape, but that low-life pirate then incapacitated Piers and ran off with him." The chair scraped against the floor as the Vice Admiral rose to his feet. "Keep tracking him. I'm coming to handle this myself." "Yes, sir." Jonathan scowled as he headed out the door. Invading his stronghold was one thing, but this was unacceptable. As everyone in Navarone knew, no one messed with the Vice Admiral's fishing. That philosophy also extended to his fishing buddy. Oh, Roronoa Zoro was so going to pay for his imprudence. The ship lurched violently. Briggs, poring over his doents while lying in his far too short bunk, was flung almost halfway across the cabin. His papers decided to make a break for it and scattered to the 4 corners of the little room. "That bloody navigator must be drunk," he snarled as he picked himself up, thinking of the things he would say to the obviously incompetent crewman. Through the thin bulkheads he could hear the terrified whinging of Commander Shepard. How typical. Useless, blustering recalcitrant. Anything would be better than sitting here picking up reports and listening to that perambulating gasbag rant, so he decided to head for the deck. The corridors swayed crazily as he traversed them, and when he opened the hatch, he was greeted with a scene of absolute chaos. Briggs also discovered then that the navigator he had mentally maligned hadn't been drunk after all. The poor sod had, in fact, a very good reason for not being able to do his job properly. He had been impaled by a piece of shrapnel and was lying on his back, bleeding out onto the deck. Another crewman, presumably the doctor, was trying to tend to him while slithering around the slippery surface. The navigator-piercing piece of shrapnel turned out to be from what was left of the steering wheel. Now that did not bode well. Neither did the scores of injured men he could see scattered around the deck. "Commander," it was Captain Tenzo. The young captain was drenched and looked as though he had been fighting a war. Briggs turned on him in annoyance. "Captain, this is an all-hands situation. Why didn't you sound the alarm?" The captain gave him a polite, if frigid, smile. "If the first wave of hailstones hadn't taken out our klaxons and kept us busy fighting for our lives, I most assuredly would have." Briggs turned and noticed that particular section of the ship was missing. "Did you say, hailstones?" "Really big ones. Heads up, here come more." Hailstone turned out to be a very inadequate word to describe the melon-sized blocks of ice that were raining down on them. The remaining Marines were desperately shooting and slashing away at the dangerous projectiles. Anything to keep them from hitting the stand melee and exploding with the force of a cannonball. Briggs drew his own weapon and RST how much he hated the crazy Grand Line weather. "Oi! Wake up!" Piers groaned. A green moss ball was floating before him and talking. Oh no, not again. The last time he had seen talking animated objects floating around, it had been during the early days of his recuperation when he'd just been weaned off his painkillers. The side effects and withdrawal symptoms had been interesting. Dr. Kabato had assured him that he had held some very amusing conversations with the IV bag, food tray and his right foot. "I'm not talking to you," he informed the moss ball. Then he realized that by telling the moss ball he was not talking to him, he was in fact talking to it. He sighed in resignation and made to get up, then clutched his side and groaned again. "Don't be such a wuss. I only used the flat of my sword." "Sword?" Piers focused his vision and the moss ball turned into Roronoa Zoro, green hair in stark contrast against the gray steel wall behind him. Zoro was standing over him, scowling. They were in a dark room. Probably one of the storage areas. "You're not a talking moss ball. Did you hit your head or something? I didn't hit you that hard." "Not that it matters or anything, but you hit me where I got shot a few months ago," Piers muttered. But he got to his feet after that. "Never mind, what happened?" "Well, I knocked you out so your fellow Marines wouldn't think you were helping us." "Wait, everyone saw you doing that?" "Yeah. I had to run for ages carrying your dead weight. You're heavier than you look." Piers groaned for a third time. Once this got around the G8 grapevine, he was never going to be able to live it down. So, with his reputation in tatters, he resigned himself to the next inevitable course of action. Okay. This can still work. So I'll pretend to be your hostage and lead you out. You'd better tie my hands or something. Hand me your bandana, that'll work." Piers trailed off when he realized Zoro was glaring at him. "Okay, not the bandana then. Maybe we can find some rope or something." A search of the room yielded some loose laundry lines that would serve. "Not so tight, just keep them loose for show." "Okay, I think that's convincing enough. You'll probably have to march me at sword point or something to look convincing." "Oi, isn't that a bit much? There ought to be a believable reason why I'm not fighting back against you. I'm supposed to be one of the officers here." Zoro seemed only mildly interested. "You are, huh? What, you a lieutenant or something?" "Oh no, I'm just a chief petty officer." This didn't seem to impress the pirate hunter much. They made their way through the hallways. By some kind of odd luck, the way was clear so far. "So how is Kuina?" Zoro asked out of the blue. "Kuina? Last I heard, she's working as a liaison officer with the Alabastan royalty back in Alubarna. I haven't seen her in person for a long time, but she sends letters sometimes." "Liaison officer, huh? Is that a high marine rank?" "It's more of a kind of a special role, really. She got a double promotion to petty officer back then for her efforts in settling the Alabastan Civil War. though. Now she's only just one rank below me. Kuina is ranked below you? Zoro looked extremely insulted at the idea. You Marines are crazy? Well, she only joined the Marines when we were in Logia Town. It's considered really fast progression, actually. HMPH. How come you're not with her now? Well, I kinda got sent here to recuperate after I got injured in Alabasta. Pierre's ears flushed red again at this. I don't really remember much about that, but I heard Ms. Kuina totally destroyed the guys responsible. Must have been awesome to see. They ran into a Marine patrol then. Pierce noted with some alarm that there were riflemen who definitely posed a threat to a close combat specialist like Zoro. Thinking quickly, he countered them by deliberately standing in their line of sight and apologizing. I'm so sorry everyone, don't worry about me. Shoot through me if you have to. Even if we have to sacrifice one of our own people to get a pirate, I'm sure Vice Admiral Jonathan will understand. The gunmen, who were from the 23rd Division, were moved to tears by Pierre's words. That command also seemed to impair their judgment, because the Marines promptly refused to shoot, threw down their rifles, and attempted to engage in hand-to-hand combat instead of endangering him, their comrade, with predictable results. Ouch. I hope you didn't hit them too hard. Pierce muttered guiltily to Zoro after the fight was over. The fearsome swordsman dispatched all of his melee opponents easily, non-lethally at his request. But the poor Marine couldn't help but feel like he had betrayed his comrades. Still, it was too late to back out now, and it wasn't long before he was leading the pirate hunter at sword point again. What do I look like, a bleeding heart? Zoro snapped angrily. And just what was that just now? Were you trying to get yourself shot? If you're a friend of Kuina's, I'd rather not have to tell her you got yourself killed in the dumbest way possible. I was just trying to keep anyone from getting killed, Pierce replied. If people started shooting, things could have gotten real messy. And putting yourself in the line of fire and telling them to shoot you works, how? Oh, they wouldn't have done it anyway. This is G8, the Marines here aren't like Shelltown. Well, Shelltown isn't like that anymore either, but you know what I mean. Zoro lapsed into a thoughtful silence. Pierce wondered if he had understood the logic behind that particular tactic. However, it turned out to be something else that was bothering the pirate hunter. You know, for a Marine, you're a lot sneakier than you look. How do you even know about Shelltown? Come to think of it, back then you said something about calling something even as well. What did you mean by that? Pierce hesitated before speaking. I was from Shelltown originally. You and Straw Hat defeated Captain Axehand Morgan. You saved us Marines from him. We kinda owe you guys for that. Oh, that Axehand guy. Huh. Guess that makes sense. Glad things got better back in Shelltown after we were gone. Him and that idiot son of his? Still can't believe you Marines let an ass like that boss you guys around. Yeah, Pierce mumbled as they rounded the corner. I can't believe it either. The crew of the Stan Malay were fighting for their lives. A veteran of the Grand Line, Briggs had seen many bad storms before, but even he had to admit this was one of the worst in his experience. Not only was visibility non-existent and the cold numbing, the waves of hailstones were relentless. Your navigator's down, who's taking up the slack? Briggs asked, slashing away at a hailstone with his newly sharpened saber. He would have to thank Toshigi for that later. Me, grunted the other captain, mirroring his action with a katana. The assistant navigator is out, too. I'm a bloody good navigator. The helm is all yours. Then, the younger captain replied without hesitation. Or what's left of it. A scream tore through the air, and both officers turned to see a horrible sight. The aft mast had been hit by a hailstone, and the shattered boom, hanging by the tattered sail, was sweeping dangerously over the deck, lashing sailors with loose lines and wreckage. Even worse, the unfortunate ship's doctor had been caught in it, and was currently pinned against the railing by a section of broken boom, slowly being crushed to death. Captain Tenzo swore and moved over to help so quickly that Briggs wondered if he had used Rokushiki. It took Briggs a few more seconds to catch up, which was enough time for the other man to free the doctor. The poor medic was already unconscious. Briggs fervently hoped the crew had more than one doctor with them. We need to get that boom under control, he yelled at Tenzo, who was carrying the wounded doctor to safety. The captain flashed him a, why thank you Captain obvious look that could possibly be called a smeeways and squinted. As if to spite them, the boom decided to sweep back across the deck just at that moment. Captain Tenzo saw it coming, but still had his hands full with the doctor. There was no room to duck, so he could only try and sprint out of range while carrying the wounded man. He almost made it, too. With a sickening crunch, the shattered boom caught the captain on the right side, sending both doctor and commanding officer crashing to the deck. The doctor was already out to begin with, and it appeared that Captain Tenzo had taken most of the force from the blow. "Captain!" There was no response from the unmoving figure. The cry was quickly taken up by the other sailors on deck. "The captain's down, oh God, what do we do, what do we do? Who's next in command?" Briggs, who had been uninjured, had easily avoided the boom by leaping out of the way, and was now scrambling to his feet again. No one answered. The sight of their captain lying motionless on the water-slicked deck had sent the Marines into a frenzied panic. Briggs repeated his question again. No one from the green and inexperienced crew paid him any heed. A couple were blindly rushing in to help their captain with no thought for their own safety. Naturally, this was the point when the accursed boom decided to break off and slide back across the deck again to finish them all off. The officers of G8 were deep in planning their pursuit of Roronoa Zoro. But something had been niggling at their base commander for a while now. He soon voiced it. "This makes no sense. Why would Roronoa pick an able-bodied Marine who could give him trouble as a hostage instead of an easier target?" Vice Admiral Jonathan had been mentored by Admiral Akainu himself. While most people tended to only remember the Admiral's fearsome prowess in combat, the man was also renowned for his shrewd mind. His protégé had adopted this facet of his in particular. In fact, some could almost say Jonathan took it to new levels. He was particularly adept at seeing patterns and details that other people would miss. Sadly, Lieutenant Drake definitely counted as one of those other people. "Can't expect reason to be found in pirates, sir. Perhaps he knew an officer would be more valuable." Jonathan responded thoughtfully. "Come to think of it, didn't Chief Petty Officer Pierce come from the East Blue?" Lieutenant Drake stared at the Vice Admiral for a long moment, as if wondering what relevance this had to the current discussion. "Yes, he does. I distinctly remember him telling some very long-winded stories about him, his Uncle Sappy, and his pops, that were set in Logatown. Something about being chased by a giant sea cane." "You actually listened to his stories, Lieutenant?" another one of the officers asked, sniggering. "The great Dobie Mick, yeah right. Well, I suppose East Blue softies would be scared of a single sea cane." "Enough of that," Jonathan cut in. "Lieutenant Drake, I'm leaving the ambush to you. There's something I would like to verify before I confront Roronoa." "Affirmative, sir. But why?" "Let's just say I have a hunch." The base commander paused and flashed a toothy smile. "As I'm sure you're all aware, pirate hunter Zoro is from the East Blue too." The surface of the pond was as calm as a mirror. Bridging it was a series of tiny stepping stones, each providing barely enough space for half a foothold. Upon this precarious ground, a girl in a blue robe and a dark man with pale wings were engaged in a deadly dance, trading and dodging blows that never seemed to connect. Then the girl sneezed, lost her focus, and promptly tumbled into the pond with an ignominious splash. As she sputtered and surfaced, she could hear a grunt of disapproval from her stern-looking opponent. "How careless, Kuina. I will try harder next time, Gedatsu-sensei," his student replied contritely, picking duckweed out of her hair. The former sky priest followed up with a lecture about the importance of not letting minor distractions break her control over mantra, before dismissing his student for the morning. Gedatsu-san was almost as merciless as Ichi-san sometimes, Kuina reflected as she squelched her way back to her room to change. Her robe was probably ruined. Thankfully, it was just a cheap koman she had made herself. She sneezed again. "Oh dear. I hope you aren't coming down with a cold, Lady Kuina," said Guro, the resort owner, who had been passing by. He tactfully chose to not mention the long trail of muddy water she had left in her wake. "Thank you, Guro-san. It doesn't feel like a cold, but I'm not sure why." Kuina frowned in puzzlement. "I just can't seem to stop sneezing this morning." "So why is Lieutenant Drake calling the patrols back?" the Marine asked his companion as they made their way back to base. "Seems like one of the pirates, the pirate hunter Zoro, took one of the officers hostage. Commander Jonathan wants us to focus on resolving that situation for now. Man, taking an officer. That's crazy. Both men continued talking as they went on their way. After they had gone, a thicket of bushes rustled and out crawled Usopp, while from a tree above, Nico Robin slipped down gracefully. Well now, from the sound of things, it seems that Swordsman San has been causing the Marines some trouble. Usopp sounded a little disturbed at the news. Zoro, taking hostages? That doesn't sound right. Indeed. Robin did not change her expression. I'm not sure of the wisdom of taking prisoners in this situation, however. I do hope he has a good reason for it. So where are we headed now? Zoro asked as they navigated another maze of passageways. Somewhere you can lie low. It'll be easier if you stay hidden while I go around looking for the rest of your crew. You must like Kuina a lot to be sticking your neck out for her friends like this. Yeah, I do. Ever since the moment I met her I thought she was the one. Pierre's ears suddenly turned red as he realized what he had just let slip. I mean. Zoro's face suddenly turned dark. He gripped the stammering Marine by the collar of his vest, slammed him against the wall, and put his face inches away from Pierre's. So that was it, you little weasel. What are your intentions towards Kuina? You'd better not have been buttering me up because you think it'll help you worm your way into her. It was at this moment when Zoro realized he was talking to the wall. During his diatribe Pierre had taken his chance to slip free, leaving his navy blue padded vest still in Zoro's grasp. Zoro turned and tossed the garment aside, scowling. You're pretty fast. Pierre's already had his show bonds off and his hands up in a defensive stance. Look, Mr. Zoro, I think I should explain. I care about Miss Kuina a lot, but it's not like what you think. That's not the only reason I'm helping you, or why I'm Miss Kuina's friend in the first place. Oh, you'd better not be trying to take advantage of her just because she needs people to get around. Zoro bared an inch of Kitetsu's blade, the threat implicit. Miss Kuina would never let anybody take advantage of her, Pierre protested immediately. She's one of the greatest swordsmen I've ever met. And you're not. Why are you following her around, then? The same reason you follow Straw Hat Luffy around. She saved my life, Pierre burst out, showing anger for the first time. Miss Kuina saved my life, Pierre repeated, stressing each word. I was fighting a pirate on my own and got beat. If she hadn't come along back in Shelltown then, I would have been killed. So I owe Miss Kuina a debt. A life debt, and my pops always said that if someone does you a good turn you pay it back with interest. I know there's probably nothing a nobody like me can do that'll ever match up to what Miss Kuina did, but that doesn't mean I just stopped trying. She needed my help in Shelltown to go after you. I was more than happy to give it then, and I'll keep giving her my help as long as she wants it. It was startling how the mild, easygoing Marine looked once he was really riled up. So don't you, follow Miss Kuina. I'm going to repay my life debt to her by doing everything I can to help her achieve her dream. That's my decision, and no one is going to scare me off from keeping it. Not even the great pirate hunter of the East Blue, Roronoa Zoro. Zoro cast an eye over the defiant man. Pierre's hands were trembling, and there was a definite shakiness to his knees. The Marine looked like he was expecting to be cut down any moment, but despite this, his gaze was steady and filled with a fiery conviction. There was the soft sound of sliding steel as Zoro returned Kitetsu into its sheath. Fine, but I'm just warning you. If you ever hurt her, or make her give up on her dream, I'll hunt you down and cut you up myself. If that ever happens, Miss Kuina do it herself first, Pierre retorted, still angry. But you're welcome to finish up after she's done. Ladies first and all that. There was a pause, then Zoro laughed. The sound of it shattered the tension, and both men relaxed somewhat. Deal, deal. They resumed their escape. Briggs didn't have much time to think about what to do, because the merciless boom, continuing on its path, was about to make him and the crewmen behind him its next casualties. He could just avoid it again, but the mental image of Smoker's face flashed before him. No, dodging was out of the question. That meant the two reckless seamen were probably going to die from their stupidity. If the Commodore ever got wind of the fact that he'd done nothing and let a pair of clueless Marines get killed without at least trying to save them, he'd never hear the end of it. It also meant the only logical option Briggs had left was his trump card, his devil fruit. Bloody hell, working under that damn white hunter was turning him into such a sap. Still, it had to be done. Charge forward. Shift into full zone form. Force of impact rendered negligible by reduction in inertial mass. Cling to the surface of the boom. Crawl over. Shift to half zone form. Use extended size, reach and superior grip to slow the momentum of that dangerous piece of wreckage. In a cacophony of groans and rattles, the wrecked boom shuddered to a stop inches away from the terrified crewman kneeling next to the downed captain. "Don't just stand there staring," Briggs barked at the gawking sailors, slack-jawed at his inhuman hybrid devil fruit form. "Lash that damn thing down. After that, any walking wounded get Captain Tenzo and other injured below decks. Able-bodied sailors keep defending the ship from the hail and wait for my instructions. We're going to have to steer this leaky tub out of the storm if any of you want to live to see Navarone." Whether it was the commanding tone or his imposing form, it did the trick. The panicking crew were galvanized back into productive action and they scuttled about doing what needed to be done to get the Stan Malay out of danger. "Commander, sir, the captain's alive. So's the doc," came a cry from one of the Marines who had been checking on Tenzo and the doctor. "Sir, can you hear me? Can you walk?" Captain Tenzo, with some help from one of the Marines, staggered to his feet. Briggs noticed his right arm appeared to be giving him a lot of trouble. "Don't worry about me. Get the doctor below decks quick." "Captain Tenzo, your arm, I know, I'm walking wounded now," the younger captain said immediately in response to Briggs' unfinished question. "Not yet, there are injured men that still need my help. And yes, I am fine with you assuming command, Captain Barkskin. Just get my men out of this alive." So he had recognized who Briggs was from his powers right away. It was at that point when Briggs decided he liked Captain Tenzo. Despite his age, he was competent, cared for his subordinates, and didn't let pride get in the way of the practicalities of command. In fact, he reminded him a lot of him. That was how it usually started, didn't it? You saved each other's lives, became friends, then eventually, they stabbed you in the back. Just like that bastard who was still out there, running free without having to face the consequences of his actions. Suddenly the warm feeling of camaraderie was gone. Briggs shrank back to his human form as soon as the boom was secure. No point getting attached. No point making friends. Just get the job done and move on. The little mobile Den Mushi in Lieutenant Drake's pocket was clamoring for attention. "Commander Jonathan?" the lieutenant greeted, recognizing the voice of his superior. "Lieutenant, I checked the personnel records. I know why Roranoa took Piers now. It wasn't just a simple hostage situation, it was revenge." "Revenge? For what?" "No time to explain. But this has taken a serious turn and we need to intercept them as soon as possible. If Roranoa gets into a situation where he no longer needs a hostage, he will probably kill Piers the first chance he gets." "I don't understand." "Never mind. Where are they now? Is your ambush ready?" "Yes, sir. The 7th Squadron has been herding them towards our position in the North Observation Platform. They took heavy casualties but as far as we can tell, no fatalities." "Good." Vice Admiral Jonathan's voice was authoritative. "I'm heading over there now. Do not engage that pirate hunter until I get there." The hailstorm was lessening in force. The blocks of ice still rained down, but the frequency had lessened somewhat. Somehow, the skeleton crew had managed to hold together and keep the ship sailing. There had been no other casualties since, and Briggs was determined to keep it that way. As he paused for a moment to catch his breath, the hatch swung open, and Commander Shepard peered out. "What the blazes is going on here? Why can't you fools sail this thing properly?" "Shepard." For once Briggs was not displeased to see the appearance of the inspector. "We're in the middle of a CLASS-5 hailstorm. We need all the help we can get on deck. Get over there and man the rudder." "Where's Captain Tenzo? Why is that fool slacking off?" Shepard interrupted in outrage. "And how dare you order me around? I am a special inspector from HQ. I don't take orders from the likes of you. Especially someone with your dubious record, Barkskin. You could be calling himself now for all I care. Captain Tenzo was injured and is out of commission. I'm the acting captain for the moment. Just bloody help already. I won't take orders from you. If there's anyone who should be giving orders, it should be me and not you. Captain, I lost the Golden Hind." Before Briggs had time to think over his actions, he was in his hybrid form again and had Shepard dangling from the collar, 2 feet off the deck. You will follow my orders for now, Shepard, he said with cold fury in his voice. If you wanted to play at being captain, then maybe you should have been up here half an hour ago helping, instead of cowering in your bunk. Right now, if you ever want to see dry land again, do what I say, or I will throw you overboard, HQ be damned. Shepard took one look at his towering hybrid form, and nodded, gritting his teeth. Briggs released him, and the other officer scrambled away quickly. I'll remember this, Barkskin. Remember all you like, Briggs replied evenly, coward. The Marines on duty heard it all and snickered. Shepard heard them too, and that was when his dislike for Briggs changed from general disdain into a personal vendetta. Briggs knew then he had just made an enemy, but Shepard would just have to take a number and get in line. It was already a very long line anyway. Oi, where are we headed now? Zoro and Piers were still making their way through the ridiculous maze of passageways that G8 seemed to have no shortage of. Zoro wondered how anyone could be expected to find anything in such a place. No wonder most of the Marines were crap at fighting. They probably wasted most of their training time trying to get from one point to another instead. The North Observation Platform is just ahead. There's a small unmanned pillbox you can hide in until I find the rest of a tour for me to be the one moving around. I hope that girlfriend of yours'll be alright. Nami, Zoro sputtered. She's not my girlfriend, and she knows how to take care of herself. Well, once I escape from you, I'll head back and look for her and the rest of your friends. Then I'll either signal to you or bring them over. Works for me, Zoro replied as Piers led him through the doorway to the walkway outside the base. Then he froze. Piers, too, had skidded to a stop. Roronoa, Zoro. We have you surrounded. Put down your weapons and surrender at once. It was Lieutenant Drake again. The entire North Observation deck behind him was filled with Marines, rifles leveled at them. Zoro cursed as Piers began backing up. As long as the Marine was between them and in the line of fire, they wouldn't be able to get a clean shot at him. Zoro decided to help him out a little and made a show of being threatening. Back off. Have you forgotten about my hostage? You damned dirty coward, snarled Lieutenant Drake at this. But he didn't seem as furious as he had been previously. You're going to learn that your low-down tactics will not benefit you here. Zoro simply drew his kitetsu in response. Then, any hopes of getting out of their situation died, when a voice spoke out behind them. Give it up, Roronoa. You can't use him as a human shield from both sides. A man, tall, mustached and with a head of reddish-brown hair, was approaching from the rear. Despite his unimposing appearance, something about him radiated menace that far exceeded that of the mass of Marines behind him. "See Commander Jonathan," blurted Piers in surprised recognition. "Why, you came in person?" "Who is this guy?" Zoro demanded of his hostage. "You, don't come any closer or what? You'll kill the hostage, you want to risk it?" "I'd be risking nothing. I know everything. You recognized Piers, didn't you? That's why you took him. You were already going to kill him as revenge. But your pettiness and desire for blood was your downfall, Roronoa. Your run ends here. Let Piers go." "I don't think so," Zoro said, drawing all his swords, "and I have no idea what you're talking about." "Mr. Zoro, that's a vice admiral," Piers warned him desperately. "You got no chance against him. You have got to surrender." "Like hell I will. Don't you get it? If you resist, he'll destroy you." "Easy now, Piers. Don't spook him." "But Piers is right," Jonathan said, addressing Zoro this time. "You may have a decent bounty, pirate hunter Zoro, but you're still no match for a vice admiral of the Marines." "And us," the Marines behind him exclaimed in unison, rifles at the ready. The swordsman was unmoved. "Bring it on, then, Soru." There was a flash, and the next moment, Zoro found himself standing alone. He turned around to see Piers and Vice Admiral Jonathan standing next to Lieutenant Drake. The Vice Admiral was already freeing the hostage he had snatched away, to the cheers of the other Marines. Zoro blinked. The Vice Admiral had moved so fast just now, he hadn't even been able to react. It reminded him of that Captain Kuro's crazy attack back in the East Blue, but with far more control and precision. "Surrender, Roronoa. You're out of your league. You have no more hostages. We will not hold back any longer. This will be your only warning." Vice Admiral Jonathan cracked his knuckles as he prepared to charge in again. In response, the Marines took aim at Zoro to better back up their commander. Things were looking grim, and Zoro realized that without his hostage, he was going to have to fight his way out of this mess all on his own. The Marines seemed to sense his intent too. "Don't give him a chance to attack. Shoot to kill," Lieutenant Drake ordered. But everyone was caught by surprise when a navy blue streak charged across the platform and plowed into Roronoa Zoro. "Sorry, Kuina," Zoro heard Piers whisper as he sank his knuckle-duster-clad fist into Zoro's face. Not expecting an attack from that quarter, he was caught off guard and sent stumbling back, his swords flying out of his grasp. "You bastard," he snarled as soon as he got his breath back, but froze at the sight of dozens of rifle barrels aimed at his face. "Stay down, please," Piers ordered, still crouching above Zoro with his fist raised. He flashed his former companion an apologetic look before resuming a fiercer expression. Behind him, the Marines were cheering again. "Nice one, CPO." There was the sound of footsteps as Vice Admiral Jonathan approached. "Your Soru is still too slow, Piers, but your timing was perfect. Well done. I'm glad to see our training sessions have paid off." "Why, yes, sir. As for you, Roronoa Zoro." The man flashed a toothy grin at his new captive. "Welcome to G8. Land in sight." The lookout shouted. The sailors on deck cheered in weary relief. It had been a hard journey for the Stan Malay and her 2 consort ships, but they had made it safely their destination at last. On the horizon, the marine stronghold of G8 loomed, its massive iron doors and walls rising proudly out of the ocean. "We're here, at bloody long last," breathed Briggs. "Seaman talk, get G8 on the Den and make sure we go through all proper docking protocols. Make sure the Pine Peak and Hawthorne Hill are where as well." "Yes, Commander sir, Mr. Helmsman, I'm sure you'll have no problem getting the Stan Malay in?" "No problem, sir," the young Marine replied immediately, eager to impress. Briggs decided not to mention that it was clear water between their location and the gates, and even a monkey would be able to get them in with little problem. "Navarone. Now that's a sight for sore eyes," a voice came from behind him. "Captain Tenzo. Good to see you back on the bridge." The captain had an arm in a sling and his face was pale with pain, but the look in his eyes was alert and focused. "I came up as soon as I could. I was running the triage below decks. We have men in serious condition, including the doctor. You have my thanks for stepping in as the Stan Malay's acting captain, Captain Barkskin." "Commander," Briggs corrected, "and I go by Briggs now. It's fine, I needed to get here too. Just doing my job." He trailed off for a moment, suddenly remembering the details of his real job. "Damn, my reports, and we're at Navarone already, double damn. Need to be somewhere? Yes, I should have been done with it by now, all crew. I'm relinquishing command back to Captain Tenzo." Without waiting for acknowledgement, Briggs bolted back below decks. When he got to his cabin, he groaned. The place was a mess and the floor was awash with loose paper from the scrambled dossiers. Resignedly, he started the arduous task of picking them up. It was going to be a nightmare figuring out which doins came from which file. The only exceptions were Aokiji's handwritten notes, which stood out from the rest, so perhaps it was no surprise that he started with them first. That was also how he ended up reading the page he hadn't gotten to yet. What the hell? For a while after that, he forgot all about the rest of the reports. Zoro's cell was hewn out of solid rock, and its open face was barred with very sturdy seastone-lined bars. If this wasn't enough for containment, the Marines had also made the effort to restrain his hands in wooden stocks, just in case. The rifle-toting guard standing outside seemed almost superfluous at this point. The guard seemed to think so too, for he was yawning. Zoro followed his example. Being captured was boring, but he perked up when he thought he heard a familiar voice outside his cell. The guard was talking to someone. "Oh, you're gonna have a word alone with the prisoner? Gonna tear him down for taking you hostage?" "Kinda. Is that okay with you guys?" "Oh hell, it's fine. Nice to see the fiery side of you for once, Piers. Just don't get kidnapped again, okay?" There was a nervous laugh. A familiar figure appeared in front of the cell shortly after that. Zoro's eyes narrowed. "You," Piers said nothing as the guard exited the room. Pirate Hunter alone. When he was sure the man had left, he finally spoke. "Mr. Zoro. I didn't mean to lead you into an ambush. I didn't know about it." Zoro just scowled at the floor. But since we did walk right into it, I had to do what I did. There was no other way around it, you know. If you hadn't been subdued then, they would have killed you and I couldn't let that happen. This'll be the safest place for you for time being. The G8 Marines aren't cruel. I'm sure the rest of your crew will be here soon. There was a long, painful silence. Piers fidgeted. Mr. Zoro, please say something. Zoro looked up. I recognize you now. Don't remember your face, but I remember your punch. You're that guy. This wasn't what it was supposed to be like. He thought the Marines were supposed to be about fighting injustice and protecting the innocent, not standing around helplessly watching a spoiled brat beat up a man who had done nothing wrong. Hey dumbass, I'd say you hit like a girl, except that would be an insult to the ones I know. For a man who had been tied to a stake for over a week now, Roronoa Zoro sure had a lot of spirit left in him. Helmeppo's embarrassed outrage made his face look even more ridiculous than usual. It also seemed to put him off attempting to hurt Zoro. In person, anyway. Instead, he motioned to Piers, who cringed. This was even worse than being made to watch. Hey you, take over. And make sure you punch him hard. Helmeppo was already headed for the shade, leaving him standing under the scorching sun with the pirate hunter. He really hated this. He had fantasies where he'd turn around, refuse, and punch Helmeppo instead, but it never happened. Piers knew the consequences of disobedience. Sorry, this wasn't what it was supposed to be like, Piers thought miserably as he began hitting a man who could not fight back. It was never meant to be like this at all. You're Helmeppo's pet marine. Now what that Vice Admiral guy said finally makes sense. He thought I wanted revenge on you for Shelltown. Piers hung his head in guilt. Yes, that was me. I guess I should have told you earlier. I first ran into you back in Shelltown, long before I met Kuina. I was Helmeppo's personal lackey. I was the one who beat you up every single day you were starving and tied to that post. The Marine's hand clenched into a fist at the memory of his shame. I was the one who threw that little girl out of the execution ground when she tried to bring you food. I didn't want to hurt her but I was too much of a coward to disobey Helmeppo then, just like I was that time he set his wolf loose in that bar. I just kept my head down and did nothing. It was Piers' turn to stare at the floor now. I was supposed to be a Marine. Instead I ended up working for a bully. In the end it was you. A bounty hunter, who saved the people and got in trouble for it. It's just not right. Piers. A call came from the Marine at the cell block gate. Commander Jonathan has requested for you. You'd better head out. Piers turned for one last look at him. Zoro met his gaze stonily, but said nothing. I gotta go, Piers whispered. Sorry. Zoro watched the Marine leave, and resigned himself to a long wait. This can't be true. There was a crackle as Briggs crumpled the sheet of paper into a ball and hurled into an empty metal coffee tin. Its existing contents, which were already smoldering, flared into flames with the additional fuel. He began pacing, agitatedly muttering to himself. No, it's theoretically possible. The facts match. It's the kind of thing that bastard Sakazuki would do. But genocide on that scale? On unarmed civilian ships? What the hell had gone on in Ohara? What the hell kind of justice was that? Briggs asked aloud. There was a knock on the door. Commander, Captain Tenzo asked us to inform you. Vice Admiral Jonathan just granted us permission to dock. The G8 gates are finally opening. Did you want to be up on deck when we go in? Give Captain Tenzo my thanks. I'll be up shortly. Yes, Commander, sir. The footsteps faded away. Briggs fiddled with the empty wrapper of Aokiji's dispatch, then added it into the tin to burn along with its former contents. Then, he gathered his shaken composure and made up his mind. Basic intelligence guidelines said to never rely on just one source. Aokiji's story was just one side of the story. He didn't doubt that Aokiji was being truthful, but truth and accuracy were two very different things. As a trained intelligence officer, the most reasonable thing to do next was obviously get more accounts from witnesses of the incident to corroborate facts. And as fate would have it, there was at least one other person in G8 who could give him the information he needed. The fire in the tin burned out in a weak puff of dark smoke. Before Briggs left, he slapped the lid on, transformed his hand so that the heat would not injure it, and flung the ashes out of the porthole window. The little coffee tin hit the water with a smack. What was left, that particular fragment of Ohara's true history, was soon left behind as refuse bobbing on the surface of the water.